Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Sunday, March the 21st, Pope Francis calls for clean water and sanitation to be available to all. The bishops of England and Wales set aside the 23rd of March as a day of prayer for victims of the coronavirus pandemic. And we recall the Pope's historic visit to Iraq at the beginning of March through the eyes of Yazidi author and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Nadia Murad. In the Vatican, I'm Linda Bordoni. Pope Francis on Sunday called for clean drinking water and sanitation for all, remarking on how clean water is a right too many of our brothers and sisters do not have access to. Speaking after the Angelus prayer, the Pope looked ahead to the annual observance of World Water Day, marked each year on the 22nd of March.
La giornata mondiale dell'acqua.
Tomorrow is World Water Day, he said. It invites us to reflect on the value of this wonderful and irreplaceable gift of God. For us believers, Sister Water is not a commodity. It is a universal symbol and source of life and health. Highlighting the fact that so many people across the world have little access to water, which is perhaps polluted, the Pope said it is necessary to ensure drinking water and sanitation to all.
È necessario assicurare a tutti acqua potabile e servizi igienici.
The Pope went on to thank and encourage those who, through their different professional capacities and responsibilities, work for this very important purpose. He highlighted the example of Argentina's University Institute for Water and Sanitation, located in the Palace of Water in Buenos Aires, which aims to be a significant player in water and sanitation education in the country and the region. I think of those, the Pope continued, who work to carry forward this work and raise awareness regarding the importance of water. The annual World Water Day observance is an occasion to celebrate water and raise awareness of the global water crisis. A core focus of the observance is to support the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 6, Water and Sanitation for All, by 2030. Also addressing the faithful after the Angelus prayer, Pope Francis recalled Italy's Day of Remembrance for the innocent victims of the mafia, held each year on the 21st of March.
Oggi in Italia
he noted that there are mafia organizations in various parts of the world that are exploiting the coronavirus pandemic to enrich themselves through corruption.
Sfruttando la pandemia, si stanno arricchendo con la corruzione.
He also recalled condemnations of the mafia by his predecessors, Pope St. John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI. St. John Paul II, he said, denounced their culture of death, and Benedict XVI condemned them as a road of death. He described mafias as organizations of sin that are contrary to the gospel of Christ, and said they exchange faith for idolatry. Finally, Pope Francis invited the faithful to remember all the victims of mafia organizations and to renew a commitment against these criminal organizations. And before making these appeals on the fifth Sunday of Lent, Pope Francis reflected on the reading from the Gospel of the Day, which recounts when some Greeks approached the Apostle Philip asking to see Jesus. Their request, Pope explained, symbolically reflects one asked by men and women down through the ages wishing to know the Lord. Thaddeus Jones has this report.
Addressing the faithful via a live broadcast from the Library of the Apostolic Palace due to a new pandemic lockdown in Italy, Pope Francis recalled the great responsibility Christians and our communities have in helping people to meet and know Jesus. The day's Gospel reading recounts how Jesus responds to the request of the Greeks by saying, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit."
E come risponde Gesù a quella richiesta?
The Pope said this answer shows that Jesus is the hidden seed ready to die in order to bear much fruit. and in order to know and understand him, you look at the cross. The sign of the cross over the centuries, the Pope said, has become the symbol par excellence of Christians. And the crucifix is often where people see Jesus, especially those from places where Christianity is not well known, where it's the sign they encounter and come to recognize. They see them in churches, the homes of Christians, or worn by believers. The important thing, the Pope said, is that the sign be consistent with the gospel. The cross cannot but express love, service, unreserved self-giving, to be truly the tree of life.
Anche oggi tante persone, spesso senza dirlo,
Oftentimes, people today wish to know more about Jesus, implicitly wanting to see Jesus. And Pope Francis says Christians must respond with the witness of a life that is given in service. We are called to sow seeds of love through concrete, simple, and courageous gestures, not just words, the Pope said. The Lord, with His grace, makes us bear fruit, even when misunderstandings, difficulty, or persecution exist. During these trials, while the seed is dying, is when life blossoms to bear ripe fruit in due time, he noted, since death and life intertwine, and we can experience the joy and true fruitfulness of love, which always is given in God's style, closeness, compassion, tenderness.
La Vergine Maria ci aiuti a seguire Gesù.
Pope prayed that the Virgin Mary might help us follow Jesus on this journey of service so that the love of Christ may shine and all can see and know Him. I'm Thaddeus Jones.
The bishops of England and Wales are inviting the faithful to pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament on the 23rd of March to remember victims of the coronavirus pandemic. Lydia O'Kane tells us more.
A year on from the first national lockdown in the UK, a minute's silence will be observed at 12 noon local time on March the 23rd to remember all those who have lost their lives to COVID-19. That same evening, people are being encouraged to create a beacon of remembrance on their doorsteps by beaming phones, candles and torches into the night sky. Prominent buildings and landmarks will also be lit up across the UK. Over the past year, well over 120,000 people have died from coronavirus, and there have been more than 4 million confirmed cases of the disease. Ahead of this commemoration, the President and Vice President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales are urging the faithful to make the National Day of Reflection on COVID-19 a day of prayer as well as a day of reflection. Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster, and Archbishop Malcolm McMahon of Liverpool stressed that prayer is an essential part of this reflection and remembrance. For all who live by faith in God, reflection and prayer always go hand in hand. Prayer completes reflection. Reflection informs prayer. Prayer opens our life to its true horizons, they say. The Archbishops highlight that March 2020 was the first time churches had to be closed and express the hope that on this day every one of our churches will be open. They also invite Catholics to pray in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament on the 23rd of March. The Archbishops ask for prayers for all those who have died, whether family members or friends, over the past year, and to reflect with compassion on all those who have suffered during this last year, whether through illness, stress, financial disaster or family tensions. Cardinal Nichols and Archbishop McMahon expressed the hope that as the pandemic is controlled and people's lives open up again, lessons will be learned that will help build society into a more compassionate place, less marked by inequalities and more responsive to needs and deprivation. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
And as Lydia was mentioning there, the UK has been one of the hardest hit nations by the pandemic in Europe. Weekend data showed there have been nearly 4.3 million confirmed cases of coronavirus and more than 126,000 people have died. Almost 27 million people have now had their first dose of a coronavirus vaccine. Meanwhile, medical staff and cancer patients in the Palestinian territories will be the first to be vaccinated as authorities announce the start of the nationwide campaign. People in both the West Bank and Gaza will be eligible. On Saturday, President Mahmoud Abbas received the opening jab of the COVID-19 vaccine program. Last week, 62,000 vaccine doses were delivered to the Health Ministry from the global COVAX initiative that aims to distribute vaccines vaccines to poorer countries. A total of 2,656 Palestinians have died of COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic last year, according to the Health Ministry. And finally, 2 weeks have passed since Pope Francis made his apostolic journey to Iraq. Yet the historic impact of his visit on the lives of all Iraqis will take much longer to weigh fully. The Pope spoke often about the country's minorities, especially the Yazidis, who suffered greatly under the brutal reign of the so-called Islamic State. One Yazidi woman who escaped their clutches was Nadia Murad, who is now a human rights activist and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. She has welcomed the Pope's visit and says it sent an important message of hope for Iraqi minorities, as Devon Watkins reports.
The immense courage of Nadia Murad has become a symbol for the Yazidi people and for all women who have fallen victim to violence. In 2014, she was kidnapped by the so-called Islamic State and enslaved for 3 months in Iraq. Despite falling victim to unspeakable violence, Nadia refused to give up, and now she speaks against every form of violence from her adopted home in Germany. She met Pope Francis in 2018 and gifted him with a signed copy of her autobiography, The Last Girl. The Pope told journalists on the return trip from Iraq that it touched him deeply. In a written interview with Vatican Radio, Ms. Murad spoke about the fruits she hopes to see from the Pope's visit to her home country. She told Alessandro Gisotti that Pope Francis's visit has provided the Iraqi people a chance to glimpse for themselves the potential their land holds for peace and religious freedom. It symbolized that all Iraqis, no matter their faith, are equally deserving of dignity and human rights, she said. Ms. Murad also spoke about the impact her book had on the Pope's decision to visit Iraq. During my audience with Pope Francis back in 2018, she said, we had an in-depth discussion about the Yazidi community's experience of genocide, particularly the violence endured by women and children. And she thanked him for blazing the path for Iraq's religious leaders to speak up on behalf of all religious minorities. Asked where she finds the strength to speak with such a strong voice for the voiceless, Ms. Murad recalled the great strength all Yazidis have shown in their struggle for survival. But she said the community is in great need of support in order to rebuild their lives after such a great trauma. Ms. Murad then launched a heartfelt appeal for the release of the many Yazidi women who are still in the jihadist hands. She said the fact that 2,800 Yazidi women and children remain missing in captivity after nearly 7 years shows that sexual violence and slavery are not taken seriously by the international community. However, Ms. Murad reminded all women who have fallen victim to violence that it is not their fault and that they are not alone. And the Nobel Peace Prize laureate encouraged all women to stand up and speak with one voice. When we unite to fight for our rights, she said, change will be unstoppable. I'm Devon Watkins.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. You can join us tomorrow at this very same time for more. For more on these and on other stories, and to hear this broadcast as a podcast, be sure to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va, and you can catch the latest updates on our Facebook page and on Twitter. My thanks go to Vincenzo Proto in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Linda Bordoni. Bye-bye.